we have a friend with us, Mr. Lisa Apolinski, founder and speaker, who's going to acquaintance us on email evolution and internet marketing. She is an international speaker, recognized digital strategist, and founder of Three Dog Right Incorporation. She's considered a thought leader in the industry and has worked in the digital space for nearly 20 years. Her focus is on managing and optimizing the end user experience and consider the digital space, technology, and communication in her analysis. As a strategy, she works with companies around the globe to develop and share their brand story, particularly using digital asset. With no further delay, let's call upon Mr. Lisa Apolinski to accompany us on email evaluation and internet marketing.
On your computer. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to
Oh,
talk about email evolution. Perfect. Sure.
Okay.
Thank you everyone for joining with me this morning to talk about, I think, a pretty important topic and something that doesn't always get the respect and credence that it deserves. Again, my name is Lisa Apolinski. I am the CEO and founder of Three Dog Right. I am coming to you from Los Angeles. I did an article a couple weeks ago about using your outdoor space, and so I decided to take my own advice. So I'm out in the beautiful background in beautiful Los Angeles, and I'm going to be talking to you for the next 30 to 40 minutes on how to really use your email. We're going to go through the history of email, talk about the impact, and then talk about best practices, because this channel is not going away. So let's get started. A little bit about me. I have been doing digital marketing for almost 20 years. I am a professional speaker, author, and I also work with companies around the globe, helping them with their digital message. And email is a huge part of getting your message across to your audience and your prospects. And so let's go right in with a history of email. Kind of crazy to believe that in 1971 is when the first true electronic message was sent. It was a test message that was sent, and that really started this whole concept of digital communication. In 1988, is when we saw the first real advancement in terms of making a message more visual and much more user-friendly. Steve Dorner developed an application that created a graphic user interface that you and I are very used to now, and that was revolutionary. Between 1990 and 1995, we started to see companies like AOL, Prodigy, CompuServe, they started to send electronic messages. And what was really interesting was in 1996 and 97, Hotmail and other companies started to provide free email. That was very, very critical. Before, we had businesses that handled and sent emails electronically to each other. And in 96, 97, we started to see people in their homes actually getting email and getting it for free, which made it very widespread and popular. And by 1997, there were approximately 10 million global email users. So you can see that there was a huge impact. It took almost 30 years, but by 2001, almost every business had an email. So that was also very critical, that businesses started to recognize that we need email communication in order to run our operations more efficiently and to keep things going. like all good things, of course, we started to have spam issues at that point. And so CAN-SPAM law was enacted in 2003, which allowed recipients to say that they wanted to unsubscribe to the emails they were getting. And the next big technology move that really helped us to establish email as a really awesome communication channel was in 2004, where we started to actually measure the impact of emails that were being sent out. That was when companies like AOL and Hotmail and Yahoo started to report back very, very simple data. And it wasn't a lot they were reporting back. Open rates, unsubscribe rates, but they started to measure. And that is huge. That has really helped us with our digital communication to actually look at metrics. And then the next big technology breakthrough was the iPhone in 2007, which put this into the hand of every single person, which meant that you as a business could send an email and people would get it right in their hand automatically. The one thing I do want to point out is after 2007, we really haven't had that much of a technology breakthrough. So it's been 11 years that this channel has now really established maturity, saturation, and best practices around it. I know a lot of companies are starting to feel that email communication doesn't work, it's not effective. So I wanted to talk a little bit about stats on email communication, and let me just be able to see this. So 2.4 million emails are sent every second. That's a lot of email communication that goes out. And it's considered the third most influential source of information, so it's considered reliable. Now, 86% of business professionals prefer email, which makes sense. But what I really found interesting, because a lot of people will tell you, well, millennials don't like email, they don't read it. 73% of millennials prefer email for business communication. So if you hear people saying millennials aren't into email, that's been proven to not really be true. Another stat that I thought was very, very interesting, if I open the email on my mobile device and then I open it on another device, I am 65% more likely to click through to the offer of the site. I'm 65% more likely to take the call to action. That's a really big deal. And this might be surprising to some people, but plain text emails have a higher open rate. I'm going to talk a little bit about this when we get into content. A lot of companies think it needs to be flashy, there needs to be a lot of visuals, a lot of images. Gmail and other products will actually strip out most, if not all, of your visuals, your images in your email, and you have to actually click to bring them back up. So I always suggest that less is more. Simpler types of email communications that are succinct, that are easy to understand, and the call to action is clear are your best bet. Segmented emails have a 14% higher open rate. That's a big deal too. We're going to get a little bit into segmentation and talk about that and how segmentation can definitely help you if you feel like your email communication strategy is struggling. And the last point, if people are telling you that email communication is dead, we are estimating that next year, 2019, there will be 2.9 billion email users. Billion with a B. That is a big deal. So, if we continue on, so that I wanted to at least set the stage for our talk and to talk about email evolution. Are there any questions, any comments before we get going here? Okay, let's get into it then. So we really want to go from evolution to revolution. I really want you to start to think about, in terms of your email communication strategy, what can I do with a channel that is already, for all intents and purposes, mature? We tend to look at technology being at a mature phase when it's about 3 to 5 years old. We're already 11 years in from the last big technology surge for email, the thing that really kind of moved it forward. So there are a lot of things that you can be doing to optimize your email strategy and really revolutionize it to help with the communication. And if you're okay to not talk to 2.9 billion users for next year, I don't think anyone who is listening to this thinks that that's a number that they just want to walk away from. I certainly would not. So we're going to talk about 3 different areas where you can have immediate impact. You can go right off of this talk and go into your email strategy and have immediate impact, and that's what I want to bring to you. The first is audience segmentation. To me, that is a very, very huge point. We want to make sure that we're segmenting so that we get that higher click-through rate, we get that personalization, because we all want, at the end, for people to open the email, take the action, and continue on their conversion journey. The second is developing content that actually matters to your audience. We're going to talk about that. And then we're going to talk about how we apply our data to be able to optimize and continue to move through a better conversion strategy and a better user experience for your audience and your prospects. Okay, so let's start with audience segmentation. So this is before we've even sent out an email, before we've done anything. We want to look at who our audience is and how we can personalize our message to our audience. Hopefully you have some kind of data within your CRM or whatever system you are using for your prospects. And you can start very, very simple with your groups. Segmentation allows you to create personalized message. Now, it's not going to be a one-to-one, but there are patterns that you can see in your data that will help you to customize your message to that audience, at least to a degree. One thing that I think is really critical that a lot of people will skip over, and I think it's something that you actually should be doing as an exercise every year, is to develop buyer personas, prospect personas. So we want to get really specific with our personas so that when we're writing our email communication for that group, we have a persona that is our ideal candidate who we would love to see as one of our clients, and we develop our communication specifically for that individual. It should include age, it should include educational background, it should include geolocation. Are they domestic? Are they international? It should include the company size. What kind of company would you like them to come from? What industry would you like to see them come from? There might be certain industries that are your sweet spot, and you should be making sure your communication leverages that information and the fact that that's your area of expertise. You also want to think through, what pain points do I believe that individual has? Are they looking to switch vendors? Are they looking to add new products and services? Are they looking for a partner or an expert that can help me with moving my needle forward in terms of revenue? So we definitely want to have that buyer in mind. And what I like to do, and you can do this if you'd like, but I love doing this, is I actually print out my buyer. I have either an illustration or a picture of that individual. I name them. I have all their bullet points listed, and I have it up on my whiteboard. So when I'm doing my email communication, I have a visual right there, and I'm like, okay, I'm writing to Linda, who's a CMO, and she needs to have help with implementing technology in her hotel, as an example. And so my communication will have those groups up, and I think about those people when I'm developing my communication. So having that customer persona, I think, is critical. The other reason why I say that you should be doing this exercise annually is in the age of digital, things change so fast. So your perfect customer from even 2 years ago may not be your perfect customer today. It forces you to review your CRM and to see if there's any new data that's come up, a new type of person that you should be segmenting. It also makes sure that you truly understand the audience that you're talking to. And we're going to get into why that's important to really have an understanding and have your content succinct in just a couple minutes. The last thing is we're collecting data, obviously, so that we can continue to refine. And again, so that each year when we go through this exercise for audience segmentation, that we're able to just do a litmus test and make sure that we're on the right track. Data is your friend. It will help you to guide your audience segmentation so that you have the best click-through rate and the best return on this amazing channel. Whether you're doing audience segmentation through your CRM or if you're using an email service like Constant Contact, Bronto, MailChimp, whatever, because this channel is so mature, audience segmentation lists are very easy to do within whatever platform you're using, and they are standard for your package. That's another great thing about having a mature technology. You don't have to pay for things like this, audience segmentation, marketing automation. Everybody has it because they have to at this point. Any questions on audience segmentation before I continue? Anybody have a question? And I'm so glad that you're loving this. Glad that you're able to understand. I think this is awesome. And if you have questions, type them in the window. I'm happy to sidebar, have a conversation. I love the subject. I love email. Okay, let's keep going then. And let's talk about content. So we've developed our audience segmentation. We know who our personas are. We know who we're writing to. We might have 4 or 5, and that's great. Even if you only have 2, that's okay. Now we're going to talk about content. And we want to develop content that is going to be impactful to our audience so that they want to take the call to action that we're asking them to do. Content in your email, I think email strategy is a key component because, as I said in one of my stats, it's the 3rd most influential channel, which means if I'm sending out content that shows me as an expert, I'm establishing myself with my prospects, with my customers as an expert, and when they have a project, they will think of me because of this influence. So it's really key to think about your content and to structure it in a way that allows your audience to quickly read it, understand what they need to do, and to act on your call to action. It's really that simple. So we want to start with the subject line. A lot of times, are there any rules to email marketing? That's a great question. And this is where your content's going to come in. So subject line, let's talk about that for email marketing rules. You can, and again, because this is such an established channel, you can Google best practices for subject lines. You can Google best practices for content, and you will see a million articles come up, and they all pretty much say the same thing. First is the subject line. That is probably one of the most important things that you will develop for your email campaign. Why? Because my subject line determines whether or not my audience will open it or simply delete it. And you probably haven't really thought about that. You have between 3 and 4 seconds when they pull it up on their mobile device and they scan through. And think about this morning when you went through your email box. You quickly scan through. And unless the subject line was really compelling, you probably just went ahead and deleted it, because that's what I do. I get so many emails that I'm like, delete, 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 delete. Oh, that subject line looks interesting. I'll click on it. Typically, you don't want your email subject line to be more than 5 to 6 words. So the most important thing that we're developing is, one of the most important things is your subject line. So that's what we're talking about right now. Your subject line should be between 5 and 6 words. It should have some kind of teaser that lets them know what the email is about. And the other best practice, and I'm sure that the last speaker talked about this with Google AdWords, it's easier to read a subject line where the first letter is capitalized and the rest is lowercase. So if you look at my title on my slide at the top, that's how you want to write your email. Something that's very quick, very concise. Oh, sure, and I haven't gotten there yet, so I'll get to CTA or call to action. So thank you for that question. So we want to be very succinct, and we want to test subject lines. The other thing that you're able to do with your email is you can test 2, 3, 4 different subject lines and see what works. It may be that you need to include a certain word for them to open it. It may be that if you're running an event, it needs to have a month and year of the event. You'll start to see patterns with what opens up. The other thing is we want to structure our email template so that when they do open it up, it's very easy to understand what we're doing, where things are, and it gives them a framework so as you continue your communication with your prospects, they know this is information, this is bullet points, this is call to action. So think about the content architecture of your email, and you can use a very simple template if you'd like with minimal graphics. Again, less is more, and structure your email so they know that the first section is some kind of setting the stage. Your second section maybe talks about how you're an expert in that and provides some information. And the third one is what they should do next. So have things track through. And I will get to metrics in the next slide, so just hold on with me, and I'll get there in just a few minutes. Thank you for these questions, though. These are great. The other thing that I notice when I get emails where I don't want to take a call to action is I'm being sold at versus someone providing me expertise and information to help me know about a subject, learn more, and to make a decision. So I definitely suggest that instead of you just saying, we are a marketing firm that sells blah, 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 that you talk about expertise. You talk about, email marketing is something that can impact. And did you know there'll be almost 3 billion email users in 2019? How is your email marketing strategy? And here's a link to information that can give you, about some best practices. And if you're ready to talk more and need someone to look at it, contact us. So I've put in a call to action, but I've provided information that even if they decide not to contact me, they've just become more knowledgeable. I think that's really key. Have a clear CTA or call to action. Again, you send an email. What do you want them to do after they've read it? That's a really simple question, and a lot of times gets missed. If you have your email and they've opened it and they've read it, where do you want them to go next? Do you want them to watch a video? Do you want them to fill out a form for more information? Do you want them to go to your website? Make it very clear what you want them to do. The other thing is you want to make sure that you're providing useful links. What do I mean by useful links? I am linking to my website. I should link to my social channels. If I'm sharing an article from a third party, I link to it. Don't make people search for things. Put it in the email. You can do hyperlinks very easily within copy. There's no excuse for not providing at least 2 to 3 links to different areas so that if they're looking to explore, and that's what we're trying to get them to do. The email is really giving them enough information so they go, I want to learn more about that. Where can I go? And then you provide that information for them. Any other questions on content? Oh, one other thing I do want to mention, since I mentioned it earlier about images. Within your email signature, a lot of times we think we should put our logo, a favicon for Facebook or Twitter. I highly discourage you doing that. The reason being is, number one, Gmail and other types of providers, email providers, will strip out images because it slows down them being able to deliver it to you. So most of the time, I don't even see those when I get your email. So why have them in there? Number two, if you've done your branding within your template appropriately, you shouldn't have to have an additional logo at the bottom that I'm probably never even going to look at. And number three, with spam the way it is, certain images could get flagged as spam, and if your email ends up in your recipient's spam folder, they're never going to see it. So things to think about. You can certainly link, again, useful links. You can link to your website, your Facebook page, your Twitter account. Those are appropriate, and you can show those hyperlinks in your signature and in the body of your email at the bottom. But I highly discourage additional things in your email signature that 9 times out of 10 people just aren't going to see. Again, less is more when it comes to email. Okay, let's keep going and let's talk about metrics, because I love that question. I'm all about data analytics. Again, with all the tracking that happens, everything that is now available, and really companies are making it so easy for you to be able to track all the way down to a specific ad, a specific email. There's really no reason to not be tracking your data analytics to make sure that you understand what worked, what didn't, and where people went. So you're going to be collecting your data by segmentation group. Why are we doing that? Well, because we want to understand for each segment what they did. Your segmentation groups should have slightly different behaviors. So we want to make sure when we're looking at stuff, we don't aggregate it together. Keep your segmentation group data separate from each other. It's the best way for you to optimize. Understand unsubscribe, open rate, and your click-through rate. These are 3 very key points. I also want to point out that if you're getting things marked as spam, that's a huge problem, and you will get dinged. So that's one data point you do want to look at. Although really a lot of companies like Constant Contact, Bronto, MailChimp, what have you, help you to write emails and do things that won't make it look like it's spam and it won't get reported. So make sure that you're following those suggestions. Unsubscribe is a nice way for your audience to say, I don't want to hear from you anymore. This is too much. I'm not happy. Spam is when they're really getting mad at you. So we don't want to get to that point. But unsubscribe is not good either. We don't want people to unsubscribe from our email campaigns. Within the programs, you should be able to look at why they unsubscribed. A lot of companies will come up with a page when you go to unsubscribe, and you can say why you're unsubscribing. If you don't have that, you probably should add it, because that's a key factor. Was it the content wasn't relevant to me? I simply received too many emails. Things of that nature. We want to find out why people are unsubscribing. Open rate versus click-through rate. That's another important distinction. So an open rate is what it sounds like, whether or not they've opened the email. So what's going to make it determine whether or not they opened the email? It's your subject line. That's the only thing they've seen. So when you look at open rate, if you have two that you're comparing and you change the copy on one to affect the open rate, that makes no sense. No one's looked at your copy yet. It's whether or not they even opened your email. The only thing that's going to impact is your subject line. So when you're looking at your open rate, change your subject line only. Don't start messing with your copy. You haven't gotten there yet. Just focus on your subject line. When you get to click-through rate, that is when you're looking at whether or not what you wrote caused them to take the CTA or call to action. So was it compelling? Was it clear what they should do? Was the link there? Did the link actually work? Test your emails. There's no, again, you can send test emails through every single system because it's been around for so long. Test your emails and open it on both a desktop and a mobile device. Those are very, very key. So understand those key data analytics so that you're able to affect the part of the email, whether it's the subject line, the content, or the links, so that you're optimizing your email. And then you want to use that data if you want to do some automation. There are certain messages that probably make sense to automate so that you're seeing how things go. One typical one is if you send an email and they don't open it. You can send a second email after maybe 5 days, and you can automate this with a second message with a new subject line, and you can make it more urgent. You can try to change up copy and see what you can do in order to get that open rate. To me, open rate is your first gate hurdle, and click-through rate would be your second. So make sure you're following how people are going through your email and use the data for your automation depending on what action they did or did not take. And then you want to compare your data points. So what do I mean by that? First of all, you want to compare your data points to your past performance. Obviously, that's important. But the other thing that you want to do, oops, I'm trying to get out of the sun a little bit, is you want to compare your data to industry standards. Again, because we've had email for quite some time, there's a lot of information online that can tell you whether or not you're meeting industry standards with your email. Do you have a purchase list? What's a typical purchase rates, open and click-through rate for your industry? Have you cultivated your own list? And it's people who have actually subscribed to your email. If that's the case, then your open rate and click-through rate should be significantly higher. If it's not, then something's going on. So make sure that you're comparing to yourself, but then don't drink your own Kool-Aid. Compare yourself to your industry and to what others are doing and best practices to make sure that you're actually hitting industry standards and you're optimizing. That's going to really help you in terms of engagement and credibility with your audience. Are there any, that's a great question. Is it possible to grow my email list? Absolutely. This is where you can ask people to subscribe, but have them subscribe to something of value, something that is going to matter to them. You could be asking them to subscribe to an e-newsletter where it's a very simple template where you're providing 2 or 3 expert positioned articles and information maybe every month, every quarter, and be sure that they're subscribing and that you, again, are reviewing data, and especially you're unsubscribed to make sure that the content you're providing actually makes sense to them and it's something they want to learn. And when you do a newsletter or a a newsletter or an email campaign or a link to a video, again, we want to make sure every single time that we're thinking about our customer persona and we're making sure that we're providing content that actually makes our audience smarter, knowledgeable, more in the know. So I do want to give you some additional resources. I've given you 3, and they're kind of in line with what I've talked about. So the first one is, well, actually, I'm going to start from the bottom, about data. You should test that. If you have a thought and think, hey, maybe this would be a good email campaign, well, you should test that. You can test it. Go in there and test it. That is the beauty of digital. You can have fast fails. You can learn a lot of stuff, but you have to actually test it and try. This book by Chris Goward is amazing. It really looks at conversion optimization. It looks at how best practices for A/B testing, because a lot of times people will mess that up, which is surprising. They'll try to do too many things at once. And it gives you a really nice guide of how to optimize your conversion within your marketing. If I go back up, the next one, the new inbox. If you have people in your company who are like, nah, email is dead, and 2.9 billion users would be taken off the table if they stopped doing email, have them read this book. This really talks about why email marketing really is the hub. It's where people land, why it's credible, and how it's used to influence other channels. So it's another great read. And then top one, email persuasion. Content that matters. We're persuading people to open, to click through, and to engage. And I love this book too, because it helps you build authority, which is another way of saying that you're an expert. And if we're developing a relationship and we're building authority and reputation, then people are going to come to me for advice and to buy my products and services, which is going to make my marketing a lot easier because I'm already established as the expert and the go-to person.
Okay, so that was an enlightening presentation, Ms. Lisa. So it's time for the participants who have any other queries with Ms. Lisa. You can post your questions. I think so some other one has been typing for the question. So here it's, yeah.
And I see a great question. How do you avoid emails ending up in audience spam folder? Okay, so there's a lot of things that we end up doing in our subject lines. The subject lines and things that can be scanned quickly are what cause you to go into spam. And also, if you've been reported as spam, which you want to avoid, and you can actually go back and talk to Google and get yourself off of the spam list. In a subject line, there are certain words that they look for that will make your email go into spam. Winner. Anything with an exclamation mark, don't put in exclamation marks. Anything that could possibly look like it could be an email that just has no purpose whatsoever. The other thing you want to make sure is your email address has been verified so that it also doesn't go into spam. And again, if you want to test to see if you are going into spam, send a test email to someone outside of your organization. I love doing that. I love using that as one of my steps for quality check. I send it to, I find out from a colleague who has an outside Gmail account. They agree for me to send a test. I send it to them, and then they look at it. And I have someone who hasn't read it, so that I'm doing two things. I want to get a cold read, so I want to make sure that I haven't drunk my own Kool-Aid. They understand what it is that I'm asking them to do. The email makes sense. And then I also see whether or not it's gone into the spam folder. If you send out emails too often, that will also trigger a spam filter. You have to be cognizant of what you're sending and why. You have to have a strategy. You can't just send email after email after email after email. Typically, I try to wait at least a week to 10 days between emails, just because, if someone's getting something from you every other day, they're going to get pissed. Um, those are some really quick
Uh,
ideas. And again,
yep.
images can
So
trigger
participants, any other
spam filters.
questions?
So be very,
So,
very careful with what types of
so
images or graphics you have within your email itself. Simple is
can do
better.
raise your hand also.
Hopefully that
If
helps
you
you,
have any
Samuel.
other queries, you can do raise your hand. Okay.
Sure. Well, I actually see. So again, CTA is call to action. So what do I want my audience to do once they've read the email? Do I want them to watch a video, read a page, fill out a form? That's your call to action. You should always have something that you want your audience to do once they've read the email. Otherwise, you're missing an opportunity. I hope that makes sense. Um, and I'm sorry, Gulnaz, I'm not sure what you mean by, what does it mean, bandwidth? I would need a little further clarification on that. Oh, Samuel, that's a really good question. So I don't like to embed things into emails because, again, they get stripped out. I'd rather send an attachment, or even better, I have the attachment on my website. The reason why I like doing that is because then I can actually track downloads. You can certainly send an attachment in an email if it's a one-to-one and they specifically ask for it. But I personally, if I'm sending out an email with, like, let's say I'm sending a capability statement, I personally like to direct them to a landing page where they can access it. Now, I don't request them or require them to fill out something to get it. I think that's awful. That's an awful experience. But I do send them to a landing page where they can easily download it, and I can actually then track how many downloads took place. So that's a great question. I'm not sure if you're talking about bandwidth for your network or um, or actual capacity. I'm not really sure. Um, oh, okay, for the website. Yeah, so okay, I see where you're going. So the reason why they tell you that you want to hire bandwidth for your e-commerce is because when you're going through a secure website, so it has different secure points, so that if they're buying something, their credit card's information secure. If it takes more than 10 seconds for a page to load, you have, I think it's like a 70% higher probability of people abandoning the cart. People give up. People have no patience. So that's why they say you need to have a really high bandwidth, so that, and also, again, you want to test it to see how the user experiences, and you want to make it as simple as possible with not a lot of images, not a lot of stuff that would slow down its loading, so that people get to what you want them to do, which is to buy your product and get through the cart and complete it. So that's what they're talking about for bandwidth. Um, it, you can actually call your service provider, your internet service provider, to find out what your bandwidth is, and you can actually just have a conversation with them. Hey, listen, I'm doing e-commerce. Um, and again, because we've been doing this for a while, this information is readily available, and just ask them what's the best bandwidth I should be having in order for my server to run optimally and to process orders, and they'll be able to tell you. Um, they actually probably have like a really quick and dirty cheat sheet that they can use. So, okay, and that's a great question, Samuel. Evaluating your email marketing campaign. So, you want to look at a couple of items. Again, you want to compare on your past history, especially if you're A/B testing, what your open rate is, who actually opened your email, what your click-through rate is, what was the call to action, and also you want to track that over several days. That's the other thing. I think if you remember one of the stats that I had, that people will look at if they look at your email on a mobile and then later on open it on another device, there's a 60, I think it's 63% more likely that they'll actually click through and do your call to action, buy your product, what have you. So you also want to see how long it takes before you really get a drop off with open and click through rates. It could be that after 3 days, if they haven't done it, they're not going to. It could be that they hold on to the email for a week. Maybe they're waiting till a weekend where they get home and have some time to research it. So you also want to look at that. After 12 hours, what's my open and click through rate? After 24 hours, what's my open and click through rate? That will also give you information as to when to send a follow up email for a non open participant. Because if you're not giving them enough time to open it, you're just going to piss them off. So look at your data, track it, and follow it over several days, and you'll start to see patterns. That's the beauty of it. And again, a lot of these internet provider or these email service providers, they have quite a bit of data that they'll be able to pull up. They actually will have a tab specifically for analytics that will allow you to see, and they pull it all up. I mean, again, because this is a very mature, established channel, all these reports are standard. It's not like you have to know to ask for it. It'll come up in a dashboard for you. It's awesome. So, yeah. Oh, that's a really good question. Golnaz asked about adding a customer's name. Okay, so I love that idea. Just be sure that you have a full name in your email. If you have like my first initial as my first name and I get Dear L, I'm going to be really irritated. So make sure that the list that you've uploaded has complete first and last names if that's what you're going to do. And again, these programs like Constant Contact, Bronto, MailChimp, HubSpot, all of them allow that personalization. When you upload your list, make sure you upload it with first and last name, and then it'll give you the option to make that a variable field, is what we call it. And it will say, do you want to add a personalization where you add a first name? And you just click on it. You actually don't need an app. It's all in the service provider that you use. And a lot of these programs are not expensive. You can buy tiered plans depending on how many emails you send a month. And if you're only sending a few thousand or a few hundred, there are cheapy plans that you can buy, which is amazing. So hopefully that helps you. That's a great question. Oh, you know what? I will type them. So I see what you're asking. I can totally do that. So the programs I was suggesting are the ones I have. Bronto I've used, which I like. HubSpot, Constant Contact, MailChimp. There's like literally hundreds of different email providers now. Those are just 4 that I've personally used, and I know how they work, and I know they work well. Other people can probably throw, many more into the window that they've used. But yeah, there's a lot of programs out there that you can use for your email marketing. Yeah, and again, if you want to email me, info@threedogright.com. If you want to IM me on Twitter @Lisa A Blogger. Happy to answer. And Samuel has another great question. Yeah. Let me just answer his because that's actually a really good one. Um, how do you target your market without having to ask too many questions? Again, use your data. People provide so many items when they fill out forms and do things. And again, if you understand your customer persona, you actually should start to really see trends. It's just looking at your audience and your data and seeing, what trends you can see. Is it a certain job title?
Yeah.
that in
Yeah,
an
okay,
audience group,
so
in a segmentation group,
yeah,
with
yeah.
a certain industry. What you're
So, Miss
pursuing,
Lisa, so thank
let's
you
see
for
whether or
your
not you're right.
presentation today.
You
So
should
it would be
test
so
that.
informative talks you have shared with us. So thank you so much, Miss Lisa.
Okay?
Thank
This was
you. Bye
great. Thank you
bye.
so much.